Hello, this is Craig Berzinsky for Beardbrand Alliance. You're a solid 6. Now, I'm going to give you a solid 7. We're not talking about your looks here. We're talking about where you sit on the Norwood scale. In the previous 2 videos, we talked about the mature hairline and then the beginning stages of male pattern baldness. Today we're going to talk about those difficult stages, 5, 6, and 7, the one that we all fear. So let's jump into it. Here we go. So here we are. We're looking at the later steps or the later stages of male pattern baldness. So if you remember in the first video, second video, we talked about the mature hairline. Then we talked about more extreme hairlines in the front as characterized by level 3 and 4 on the Norwood scale. And now we're going to move into 5, 6, and 7. 5 is actually somewhere in the middle. Let me describe what that is. When you have a level 5 hair line on the Norwood scale, what was previously a more extreme hairline in that M shape, the point of the M in the middle starts to disintegrate a little bit. And so you get definitive thinness in the front, and you might keep a lot of the hair, not only on the sides, but on the top and around the back. Someone who has that kind of hairline would be James Gandolfini, the actor. You might recognize him here. Pretty much classic level 5, where he had pretty much a lot of hair and a thinness in the sparseness on the crown. On the Norwood scale, you can also have that coupled with thinness on the crown and the back, and that could start to progress and expand. So backing up a little bit, the Norwood scale that we're referring to actually is technically called the Hamilton-Norwood scale. It was developed in the 1950s by a guy named Hamilton, and then it was refined in the 70s by Norwood. And with his revisions, it has become known as the Norwood scale. And it's just the classification system that people use, doctors use with their patients and with their clients to actually categorize where a gentleman might be on the stages of baldness. So at that level 5, it's somewhere in the middle. You know, are you half empty or half full? I had a buddy of mine who, actually one of my best friends, and for the longest time, he's like, I'm half full. And then one day he looked at me and he says, nah, it's half empty. He was referring to the hair, that he had more hair than less, and so he was half full. And I look at level 5 as actually that. You might be sitting on the front and you might have some crown baldness in the back, but you have more hair than not. So it's actually somewhere right in the middle. And it's actually the tipping spot when you start moving beyond level 5 to level 6 that you are definitely half empty. And it's actually at level 6, actually the end of level 5, that people actually, that's where most men start to really say, hey, I'm really losing my hair and I need to do something about it. If you remember back to the last video, we talked about some of the preventive measures that you can take. They're actually better when you just start noticing that you are losing your hair. And those are the topical treatments as well as the pharmaceutical treatments that we talked about before. So waiting to level 5 might prove difficult in trying to restore hair with those methods. And so really, if you want to attack and address hair loss, and it's something that you don't want to really live with in your life, it's better to do it in the earlier stages of that, say level 3 and level 4. So with the half empty, half full analogy, most guys are actually okay to some degree up to that point. They say, I have enough hair, I can get through this. It's actually the tipping scale when you move beyond level 5 that most guys have a real problem with. Who else is not a level 5? Doug Stamper from House of Cards. You can take a look at him here, clearly level 5. Then there is an enormous jump when you move to level 6. What happens with level 6? This is already dissipated. The area that's connecting here to the crown and the back that might be thin, as well as the thin area in the front, starts to thin out even more, and it can get pretty thin up there. So right now, a gentleman that you might recognize, who might be a peer to a bunch of you, would be Prince William, is definitely moving into a level 6 classification. Someone else at the end of level 6 would be someone like Winston Churchill. So what is this? British men losing their hair more than in the rest of the world? I don't think so, but those two examples constantly came up when I was doing some research. But Prince William, if you actually take a look at him from the time that he got married about 8 or 9 years ago to the point where he is now in his late 30s, his hair has definitely thinning out. And he has moved from what was classified as a thin level 4, just not quite a decade ago, until now at level 6. So those Brits are your level 6 examples. When you move beyond level 6, what happens is, as I talked about before, the hair below the temple region around to the back is more or less permanent, and you will see more of the hair leaving the top to the point where it can actually be bald down to skin. Most of the men that I know who are level 7 do have random hair sticking up that they still have to cut off and have their barbers trim off. But for the most part, when you reach level 7, it's categorized as a classic horseshoe. So the horseshoe remaining hair is all you got left. And so it's called a classic horseshoe with baldness on the top. So Carl Reiner is an example of that. Dr. Phil. There's lots of examples of level 7 at all different ages. Because if you are destined to be level 7, typically that recession can start as early as your late teens and your 20s. It's not guaranteed, but for the most part, if you were going to end up level 7 somewhere in your 30s or 40s, it's going to start in your late teens. So those are the levels. We went from pretty much the juvenile hairline at level 1, 2, to almost complete baldness, with the exception of the horseshoe ring in level 7. And that's it. Those are your levels and your classifications. So if you are in that level 5, 6, and 7, which are the progressive levels of male pattern baldness, and you don't want that. You don't want to be perceived as bald, and or like you're not happy with that. And some of the options that I talked about previously, the medications and the topical treatments, it might be late for some of those. What are other options that you have? So you might have actually seen this example. This shows up on Instagram, this shows up on Facebook ads, and it basically is a toupee. And it is the modern version of a toupee. And so a company like, I think it's Quiff and Co. Makes high quality human hair toupees. What makes these different from the toupee of your grandpa to what the guys are wearing now is the way it's applied and just the attention to detail, especially when it comes to a lace front hairline. And so what they're trying to do is get individual hairs. If you look at anyone's hairline who has a natural hairline, hairs are not straight across. They are definitely random, and there might be a hair that's a quarter of an inch, half an inch off from where other hairs are. And so the more that is uneven, actually, it kind of is counterintuitive, the more natural it will look. And so some of these hair pieces now are making a greater effort to make the hairline as natural as possible. And what also distinguishes these from the previous kind of toupee, where it was just kind of sitting on your head, is the way that these are applied with a surgical glue. And so you're going to a stylist, you're having this thing applied to your head, and what they do is, say if you're level 5, 6, or 7, they will shave the remaining amount of hair, they will actually glue the piece of hair to your head, and then they will cut your hair. And so is that an option for you? I know one guy who has this, and for the most part, it looks pretty natural. I still think, hairlines can look pretty jarring, especially if they are really straight. And so the more high quality the hair piece is, the more likely it is to look natural. And so, but natural actually costs more money. So you're looking at spending probably about $1,200 on a hairpiece like this. And then there is routine maintenance in the form of going to a stylist, someone who is trained in applying these as well as removing them. and cutting your hair. The hairpiece is not going to grow, but your hair below the hairpiece is going to grow. So you need someone who's going to give you a haircut that can blend it in and let it grow in well, and then go back and touch it up. So there is a cost associated with not only the hairpiece itself, but also the monthly or less, maybe 3 weeks styling that you'll need to keep that thing going. So that is an option. Another option that we talked about in level 3 and 4 was micropigmentation. And I'll show you this example. This is a friend of mine, Ashley Morris, who is in his 20s and started losing his hair in his teens and has decided to get a full head micropigmentation. And so a guy like this appears to have what is a shaved head that has grown in, a couple of days. What they're doing is doing individual hairs in the pores in your head, so it looks like there's a hair growing back. This gentleman himself actually tried to do a hair transplant. It didn't take. He went back for a second hair transplant. It didn't work also. Very few of the hairs, or not enough of the hairs, took root, and they were rejected by his body. And so he's like, okay, now I have stubbles of hairs all over my head. And so he has elected to shave his head and then do the micropigmentation. I actually think that's could be a good option for people who are okay with very short hair, what appears to be very short hair, but not look like you are totally bald. So guys below, you can actually comment in the comments below if you see a difference between being totally bald and having this micropigmentation, which gives the illusion that you have a blur or a very short cropped haircut. So we're curious to see what you think about that. So those are your real options. You have some pharmaceutical things. If it's not too late, you can do a hairpiece option. You can also do micropigmentation. But then what if you're not going to do any of those and you're just going to live with it? Some guys will stay level 5 all of their lives. And some guys will never progress to level 6 or 7. Some guys will just, within a matter of a few short years, go from their juvenile hairline into their mid-20s and be a level 7 very quickly. So it's all about genetics in your family, and it's you kind of can tell. You can look at your mother's family, your dad's family. You're going to get those genes from both, and maybe get an idea of what is in store for you in your family. So you don't want to do anything more extreme as far as a hairpiece and micropigmentation. So what are the options? The options are how you trim the remaining hair that you have on your head. So with level 5, since it's half full, half empty, a lot of guys who have level 5 end up with what appears to be a significant amount of hair around the sides. And there is this, last ditch effort kind of mentality. I'm going to grow my hair long. And so what happens is a lot of guys will grow this hair out and it gets pretty wide, and then they have nothing in the front. And so it's not always the best look. And I'd say this in all due respect, but it can look almost clown-like when the hair gets really too wide with not enough hair on the top and the front. Unless you are actually growing the hair out for the sole purpose of slicking it back or getting it to the point where you can put it in a ponytail, which is an option for some guys who have a significant amount of hair at level 5. So that is an option. My suggestion with level 5 is to keep your hair cut fairly short. So you're going to see that with level 5, 6, and 7. The options for haircuts kind of go away. When you lose the amount of hair that you have in the front on a level 4, which you can play with, grow that a little longer, or have that in order to style backwards. When you don't have that, there are few less options. You can take the approach where you get a military kind of crew cut, maybe grow this a little taller, a little sharper, a little longer on the back and the sides, the top of the sides, keep the sides very short. The other option is to take the uniform, I'm going to buzz it myself approach, and just set your clipper guard for a 2 and take the whole thing down. Or go to your barber and have some kind of fade like that, going from 0 or 1 to up to a 2 or 3 on the top. So those are the options that I think look best on a level 5, and then progressing into the level 6 and the 7. When you are clearly in 6 and 7 territory, I look at Prince William And I look at him and I think your best bet would be to get a crew cut, to really take the hair off, to not have any hairs that are longer than 1/4 of an inch on the top of your head. Just my personal opinion, I think that looks best. It also embraces who you are and the level of hair that you have on your head. And I think it's generally a better look. Actor Jason Statham, who you've seen him over the past 10 years go from clearly level 5 to level 6 plus, and you've seen him wear his hair like 1/4 of an inch long, and as he has gotten older, as his hair has progressively gotten thinner on top, you've seen him start to get his hair shorter and shorter, which is actually my recommendation and what a lot of guys who are losing their hair in level 6 and 7 end up doing. As your hair gets thinner on top, the sides tend to get shorter and shorter, unless you're going to take that slick back approach. So what he has done, you can look at pictures of him about a dozen years ago with 1/4 inch sides, a little bit of hair on the top, to the pictures where he is now, where it's approaching like almost a clipperless guard. And so not quite shaved. I only found 1 or 2 pictures where he is actually totally shaved. It seems like he keeps, some amount of hair. A lot of guys admit that it's actually easier for them to maintain a buzz with clippers than it is to do a shave. But if you want to make the biggest impact on a level 6 or 7, it would be to shave your head. And a lot of guys say easy for you, or easy for guys who have hair to do. But no hiding it here. I think bald, especially coupled with a beard, is just a fantastic look. We have a lot of guys on the list who actually do shave their heads. A good example would be someone like John Travolta, who was clearly level 6 or 7 for years and wore a series of hair pieces and toupees and, changing the color and changing the style, until one day he finally just said, okay, I'm done. Everyone knows I'm bald at this point. Let it go, shaves his head, and looks all the much better for it. And so he's taken the approach of shaving his head. I don't think it's actually giving up. I actually think it's, stepping up to the point where you have, I think, a real definitive style. I mean, think about these guys. I mean, you have sports stars like Michael Jordan. Can you imagine Michael Jordan with hair? Actually, no, you can't. I mean, someone like Andrew Agassi, fantastic, had, not great hair when it was thinning and falling out, and then shaves his head, looks great. The surfer Kelly Slater, great. He's been bald from a very young age. In his 30s was completely shaved bald, looks great. You have actors like Bruce Willis, you have The Rock, you have someone like Samuel L. Jackson. You can picture all of these guys with hair, but they actually all look better without their hair. Supermodel Tyson Beckford, same thing, had buzz years ago, shaved now. So these guys, have taken a step, some of them as early as their 20s and their 30s and their 40s to actually, hey, I'm level 6 or 7 and I'm going to shave it off. And in my opinion, they all look better. You can actually find pictures of all of these guys who also not only shave their head, but at times of their lives have rocked beards. I think a lot of these guys don't rock a full-time beard because they're either working as an actor and the part doesn't call for that kind of beard. But I think, all of these guys, John Travolta, Tyson Beckford, when they have grown beards, it actually looks all the better. The proportion of seeing, a stronger looking jaw with the smooth head, great look. I hope that helps in giving you a couple of options with level 5, but also encouraging you to embrace baldness at level 6 and 7. Maybe I should join that crew. I've actually talked about that. I've thinking, I'd love to hear your opinions about what haircut I should get. And I think I'm going to do a video on that, similar to what Carlos did, because it's definitely getting time, but would bald really be an option for me? And y'all comment below, tell us what you think of guys who actually take the plunge and shave off their hair. But also, what are your thoughts on guys who are wearing a toupee or guys who would get micropigmentation? Looking forward to reading your comments as always. Until we meet again.
Hey, I'm glad you've been watching these Alliance videos. Woo, good job. Hey, do yourself a favor. Treat yourself to a little treat and come join us. Join us at the Alliance. We would love to have you. See you soon.